Well, we can't wait for football season, or at least football practice in August. It's going to be talking week coming up in the SEC in just a few weeks. Of course, talking season never stops, especially here at the Voice of College Football. So always talking season, but we hit that ultimate talking week at SEC Media Days coming up in just a few weeks. We will look at those players and coaches who will be attending SEC Media Days. And spoiler alert, when I say which coaches, it will be all the head coaches, of course. Then we will see what players will be accompanying those coaches to SEC Media Days. And with a full understanding that probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 of them may not have jobs or be attending next year's SEC Media Days in 2025. And a new wrinkle in the SEC, of course, this year is that the meetings are going on in Dallas, Texas to further assimilate Oklahoma and Texas into the SEC family of sorts. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Best discussion, debate, and analysis, we believe, based on your contribution. Thank you so much for being here. Hit the like button. You know you're going to enjoy the next hour. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. Please use the Amazon link. It does not cost you a penny. Same shopping experience. It is transparent to you. And so my thank you goes out to everyone who uses the Amazon link to help grow and build the channel. It's your one way to contribute financially to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Another big day here at the Voice of College Football. It almost seems in recent days, in recent weeks, as though it's been full throttle all the time. People ask me all the time that aren't necessarily familiar with college football. And even those people that are familiar with college football, Mark, it's the downtime. Then you're going to get revved up come this fall. Really? Seems all the same to me. It's college football around here all the time. But we've got program rankings that we're working on right now. So those are going to be released here in the next couple of weeks. 2024 program rankings. We released our top 25 that actually makes sense. However, let me include the disclaimer there, because the basis of the top 25 that actually makes sense is that it makes sense because it's based on the results on the field. We certainly have a number of people that don't understand it, that comment that it doesn't make sense. And then most of them come around after they watch it a few times and come around to the reasoning behind the top 25 that actually makes sense. And then you've always got your faction of people that will continue to live in ignorance. But the top 25 that actually makes sense based on principle doesn't make sense in the off season because it's completely based on results, not on talent, perceptions, schedules, any of that. But I was asked a number of times to produce a top 25 that actually makes sense. So we did our best to take the results and the team performances from last year, add in the new additions, subtract the NFL draft picks and other losses, and deliver our top 25 that actually makes sense. So check it out. Give it a look. Just released, I believe, last week. Today at the Voice of College Football, big day, as always. Iowa Live at 5:30 Eastern with Corey Bratta. Then at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Nebraska Live, Justin Adams, Nebraska Channel, Nebraska Live, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The Biggest 12 with Clint Foster on the Big 12 channel. If you're not aware of the Big 12 channel, look it up. It's right here at the Voice of College Football, the Big 12 channel. We just had a conversation on Oklahoma State that's being posted today with Locked On OK State, Cody Stovall. So check that out. Biggest 12, 7:30 Eastern. And then the Michigan live shows coming up at 8 with TJ, John, Ferris, the crew knocking it out on the Michigan channel, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, one other comment about content and programming before we get to our first call. It's realignment week here at the Voice of College Football. You may say last week was realignment week. Yeah, and next week might be realignment week. I'm going to keep going until I run out of reasonable ideas. Not ideas, because I could keep going endlessly with ideas, but reasonable ideas. So please check out the videos. We definitely appreciate your response to the realignment videos. And also keep in mind that we did a live stream last week, giving you the platform and the opportunity to pose your realignment thoughts, models, formats. And we will continue to do that as well as more are pouring in. And many of them are rather good, rather insightful, bring some good value to the table. So we will be highlighting those. Two other big notes from this week. Actually, there's zillions, but a few other big notes as I continue with Realignment Week. Tony Syracuse is joining us in a few days. So it's my intent, in addition to my realignment models. So you may have noticed that on Monday, we posted a video with, no, that was just this. No. Yes, Monday. We posted a video with Jackie Franchuli from 247 Sports on Virginia. So the attempt here is we're going to look at all those schools that are in the midst of this. Now, Clemson and Florida State, we talk about them all the time. We've got Florida State and Clemson channels. We discuss that all the time, and we are keeping track of their court exploits in both of those states, all three of those states, in fact. So we have plenty of content out there on Clemson and Florida State, but we want to focus on some of those mid-tier ACC schools that could be haves, they could be have-nots, and to see what they bring to the table and have those deep dive discussions. We did that again with Jackie Franchuli. Check out the conversation from Monday. We're going to do the same with Tony Syracuse from Last Word on College Football on Wake Forest, and we will look at some other schools as well. Realignment Week continues. Two more notes, only two more programming notes, I promise, and then we'll talk football. Just received a DM from Phil Steele. He is confirmed. Mark, I'll be there, of course. So we've got Phil Steele. Don't know the day and time yet, but be looking out for that. Phil Steele, of course, he of the preeminent, the standard, the gold standard, the bar of college football preview magazines. And I want to thank Phil Steele that I didn't need to buy a copy this year, that I did, but then two came in the mail, and I thought, well, he sent me a freebie for a couple of years, so this must be the freebie, plus I get the one that I purchased. So anyway, I got a backup copy. So thank you to Phil Steele, and we are looking forward to that conversation, of course. And then in addition to my appearance on Michigan Podcast with Steve Deace, this week, we are having Steve on Wednesday. That will not be live. I'm going to post that on Thursday morning. So be looking out for that premiere with Steve Deace. We're going to go through win totals and other things concerning the Big Ten and Michigan football. Thursday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Steve Deace premiere. Okay, I think we're caught up. Like to hit on SEC Media Days to a certain extent. 2025 commits rolling in from the SEC as well. And then, as I titled in the video, best matchups and maybe some under the radar matchups in the SEC if we've got time. But we want to hear from you, of course. Ballard's on the line. Christian, what's going on today?
What's up, Mark? How you doing?
I am doing well. What is up with you?
So I'm good, man. I don't have all the time in the world, but I did want to come on and talk to you. I just got back from the beach and had a good vacation with family. So it's great to
Nice.
be back on YouTube and talking football with all of you here. So, but I wanted to ask you, and I have my own personal opinions on this too. When we talk the SEC, we talk about media days coming up. It'll be great to hear from all the coaches. But let's fast forward to the actual season itself. When you look at Oklahoma and Texas and you talk about their scheduling and you talk about the games that they're going to have to play in the SEC, what would you say is the first true SEC test for these teams when you look at their schedules? Because I would say that you could talk about Texas playing Mississippi State, but I think Mississippi State's got some issues right now. You could also talk about Oklahoma and having some home games with like Tennessee. But I think for Oklahoma and Texas, I'm going to start with Oklahoma. Circle September 28th Alabama plays Georgia that day. I'm excited. But Oklahoma has to go to Jordan-Hare Stadium, and very few teams have made it out alive there. And then I would say, and this is outside of playing Oklahoma and Texas in the Red River game. We know what they can do together, but I would circle October 19th for Texas hosting the Georgia Bulldogs. Are there any games that we're overlooking on their schedule that could be a true introduction to how tough the SEC could be?
Here we go, Ballard. Let's look at OU first and foremost, as you did.
Mhm.
So as they roll through the non-conference they better have 3 wins. Then they go, well, with Oklahoma. We don't think that SEC opener against Tennessee is going to be a test, even though it's at home.
Oh, it will be, but, I I don't know. There was something that kinda stuck out to me about a road game at Jordan-Hare compared to a home game against Tennessee. Now, Tennessee is probably gonna be a much better team than Auburn this year. I think both teams improve. I always take environments into account, so I guess that's kinda where I was going with the Auburn
Sure.
game, but I definitely
No, I
would say
completely
that
agree.
that Tennessee game.
Oh,
Yeah,
I understand what you're saying about the Auburn trip, but just since you had phrased it first test in the SEC, I would agree with you that they're going to have the confines of home to comfort them in their first SEC challenge against Tennessee versus going to one of the most difficult places to play in all of college football. I think
right.
that, and you would be able to back this up as well as anyone, Christian, if you look at the last 10 plus years of the Iron Bowl, Alabama has
Yes.
been by far the better team, the better program, except for on occasion. Of course, 2013 is an exception, 2017 is an exception. However, when Bama has Auburn at home, they have won those games. I looked at the point totals just the other day. They won those games by an average of about 4 touchdowns in Tuscaloosa. And all of the games at Auburn have been either losses or just they have had to pull it out of the fire. Definitely those last 2 games, the Jalen Milroe touchdown pass at the wire on 4th and a zillion. And then, of course, 2 years prior, they needed Tank Bigsby to run out of bounds to get enough time for Bryce Young to bring it all the way down the field and take the game to overtime. So they have been on pins and needles at Auburn. And then, of course, Georgia, a much better team than Auburn last year, barely squeaked it
Right.
out on the plane. So I think you have an excellent point there, but I expect for Oklahoma to be challenged by Tennessee as well. Both games are at 3:30 Eastern, so you don't get the full night effect, but a lot of people believe in that. So that's not going to be as much of a factor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I wasn't like overlooking Tennessee necessarily. It was just one of those things where I was like, I'm looking at comparing the home environment to what you could get on the road in the SEC.
Yes. Oh, I think it's a definite swing. I think there are home field advantages that mean a great deal. I think they all mean something because you have to travel, you have to play in an unfamiliar stadium. There are a lot of things that break up your routine, but in terms of just the environment and the crowd being a huge factor, Auburn's right up there with the best.
Absolutely. That's really all I got, Mark. I mean, I'm just looking forward to this season, especially with realignment and everything. I know for a while it kind of made some people upset, but I think we need to get excited for these 2 teams coming into the SEC and just accept that they are 2 really good programs in the country, and that I see my comment there, by the way. It does just mean more, when you're in the SEC, and, these are 2 really historic programs. They're really, really good. They got a lot of potential in this conference. They might be kinda rocky at first, but at the same time, I think both teams will be really prepared.
Ballard, next time we have you on, next time you make a call, I'm going to ask you a follow up question to It Just Means More. So that's a little tease for you and for everybody else out there. We'll take a little time on that one next time you stop by. But we appreciate you. Ballard's got
Yep.
a channel here on YouTube as well. What is the best way that people can find your channel?
Yeah, you see my name there in the comments all the time, Ballard Sports Media. Just go subscribe over there. You can also follow at Ballard Sports on Twitter.
All right. Very good. Thanks, man. Good to see you.
Thanks, Mark. Love you guys.
Ballard's a good guy. We appreciate him stopping by. All right. He also asked to look at the Texas schedule. Now, the difference between Texas and Oklahoma in terms of what we can expect going into SEC play would be that, of course, Texas has the big challenge of going to Michigan in week 2. So that is going to show how good Texas is to a certain extent, or at least how good they are through the first 2 weeks of the season. Teams change. We had that test with Texas the last 2 years against Alabama. Of course, they passed with flying colors in Tuscaloosa this past season, but the year before, they may have even proven more the year before in Austin in a loss, taking Bryce Young and company down to the last play of the game because that Texas team and program had been down for quite some time. And even though they didn't have an outstanding season at 8-5, they showed what they're capable of. They showed that I anticipated Alabama going into Austin 2 years ago and flattening Texas. I did not expect that to be a good game. They even lost Quinn Ewers, and still with Hudson Card at quarterback outplayed Bama. So Texas at this point is a pretty, of course, like everybody else, especially the elites that lose early entries into the NFL draft, there's a lot of turnover, a lot of inexperienced young guys that have to play. Especially, they have some situations along the defensive front that are a bit questionable. In particular, the defense, again, continues to be the question, and the secondary as well that they've tried to retool. But other than that, it's a pretty experienced team across the board. Quarterback, both running backs back from last season. When you talk about CJ Baxter and Jadon Blue, and the wide receiver core had to be retooled, but they did it the experienced route through the transfer portal. And Isaiah Bond is going to be a big component there. And so Texas is going to have shown us something before they start to play the SEC. And of course, that's going to be Mississippi State at home. And as Ballard alluded to, even though once you hit the SEC, even if it's take Vandy out of the SEC, they're almost in a different league, unfortunately for them and their fans, that everybody else is going to at least, they might be substandard football teams for SEC play, but they're still going to bring SEC caliber athletes and trench play to a certain extent, at least. Even South Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas. And so Texas might roll Mississippi State, but they're going to leave that field knowing that they've been in a football game. Now, in terms of competitive on the score, and Mississippi State, don't be surprised if they go in there and show us something. However, again, on one hand, Jeff Levy, first season at Mississippi State, expect a transition anytime there's a first-year head coach and a new head coach who's never been a head coach before. And on top of that, the reason they've got a new head coach, they weren't very good last year, going 5-7, which includes 5-7, 1-7 in the SEC. I believe that's correct. Mississippi State won their one big non-conference game against Arizona, so they must have won all the non-conference games. They lost 7 of 8 in the SEC, so not very good. So that's probably not the challenge. We'll take Oklahoma out of the mix because it's a new SEC game, but it's not new to Texas. So, of course, Georgia comes in as what many people consider. I saw a list the other day that this was named, not surprisingly, the most anticipated game of the season, Georgia at Texas. And especially if you throw out all the traditional games that we see every season, Ohio State, Michigan, etc., this would be the one that I think would be on people's radar as either number 1, number 2 with Ohio State and Oregon. Those would be the two that come to mind as being far and away based on preseason rankings and expectations, to be the two games that are going to capture our attention. That should be a scene. Do we have a time for that? We believe we've got 3:30. Oh, it could be at 8, so they've not decided on a game time for Georgia, Texas. Wow. They got together in the 2019 Sugar Bowl, and Texas pulled off an upset there. Georgia also cost Texas a national championship in 1983 with a muffed punt with about 4 minutes left in that game. Texas was up 9-3, muffed a punt with about 4 minutes left, looking to run out the clock. Georgia scored a touchdown to win the game 10-9. And Texas should have actually, if you run through the results and the metrics and everything involved, which is what we do here at the Voice of College Football, Texas should claim a national championship in 1983. If I was Texas, I would claim a national championship. If I was Auburn, I would claim a national championship. We have left the link in the chat if you want to give me a call to talk SEC. And before we get to our next topic, just to lay things out here at the Voice of College Football going forward, what you can expect, and we will announce this a little bit more officially. Here's the game plan for the rest of the summer going into the season. So we've got SEC and Big Ten Media Days coming up at the end of the month. That week of SEC and Big Ten Media Days, we will be live near the end or at the conclusion of those press conferences and interviews so that we can catch as much as possible, bring on a lot of guests that are attending SEC and Big Ten Media Days. And I don't want to leave out the other two. The Big 12, we will cover the Big 12. If you checked us out last year, if you were here, you know that we were live every day for Big 10, SEC, Big 12, ACC, and at the time, Pac-12 Media Days. So we will cover it as much as one man possibly can. And then with all the contacts that we have out there, we will be here live every day during, let's just say, Media Days. And then we're going to launch that into our in-season coverage. And therefore, I'm going to be live here every morning to take your calls on college football once we hit Media Days and on into August camp. Every morning live with you. Can you stand it? You don't have to look at me every morning. You can use the phone. You can use whatever platform. You can just listen. You don't want to stare at me every morning, but be here for the college football talk every morning in August throughout the season, taking your calls and tons of great guests as well. All right, let's get to SEC Media Days. We don't necessarily need to give this a lot of time. Unless, as I mentioned to somebody just the other couple minutes ago, sometimes these spark thoughts of mine and then I ramble on for 45 minutes. But as it stands right now, we're just going to look at names of players and coaches. Alabama bringing to SEC Media Days Jalen Milroe, junior quarterback Tyler Booker, offensive lineman as a junior, and Malachi Moore, one of the best defensive backs in all of college football, grad student. Arkansas, Andrew Armstrong, their new quarterback from Boise State, Taylon Green, Landon Jackson, defensive end, and one of the best in the SEC. Auburn, they must be pretty comfortable with Peyton Thorne at quarterback. He's a senior, of course, former Michigan State Spartan. Eugene Asante, linebacker, senior, and Keldrick Falk, defensive end from Auburn, is going to attend. Man, back when I used to attend these SEC Media Days and cover the SEC Media Days, there was only two players then, if I recall correctly. Florida, Graham Mertz, former Badger at quarterback, had a remarkable comeback season last year. Shamar James, who was one of the highest rated players coming out of high school a couple years ago, inside linebacker, and of course the Louisiana running back, Montrell Johnson. We've got Georgia showing up with Carson Beck. We posted a video about a month ago where we looked at 8 different rankings, ratings, sites, and services. All of them had Carson Beck rated as the number 1 quarterback in college football. All of them, number 1. I don't disagree with that, but he does not strike me, at least through one season as a starter. He does not strike me as, and I'm not talking about skill sets. So I'm going to throw out a bunch of different skill set types of quarterbacks. I'm just talking about quality of play, being a game changer, either with your arm or your legs or both. He does not hit me as Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Michael Vick, Cam Newton. Capable, accomplished, poised, excellent arm, good enough athlete. That's how he strikes me after watching him play Auburn, Alabama. Georgia just didn't have that much of a schedule last year to watch him play that many times. Ole Miss. Probably started watching the Kentucky game, but that was such a wipeout that forget it. Michael Williams, great defensive lineman at Georgia, will show up at media days along with Malachi Starks, the safety. Kentucky's got Marquise Cox, offensive lineman, De'Eric Jackson, the linebacker, and Deion Walker, who is one of the very best players in the country at his position, the junior defensive lineman. LSU with a new quarterback, of course, in Garrett Nussmeier. We've talked a lot about him. Actually, we recorded on Monday with our guy Carter from LSU Power Hour. Check out those videos on the LSU and the SEC channels. Mason Taylor, one of the best tight ends in college football, caught the game winner against Alabama on the last play of the game 2 years ago. Harold Perkins, who, if unleashed and schemed the correct way, is devastating. I believe that Harold Perkins might be the best defensive player in college football. However, I don't know, as they attempt to make him an inside linebacker, that he's going to have the freedom to show that like he did 2 years ago. LSU would not have made the SEC championship game in 2022 without Harold Perkins playing his rear end off. They wouldn't have won some of those games, especially the Arkansas game. They almost got upset by Arkansas, and he just took over the game. Jaden Daniels and company could do nothing on offense in that game. Ole Miss, Jackson Dart. I believe Jackson Dart is possibly the most underrated elite quarterback in college football. I don't hear a lot about Jackson Dart. And I'll challenge myself here because a lot of people make comments about, Mark, this person's underrated, they're overrated. And I think, well, where are you getting that rating from? I'm just talking about in general, my perception of what's out there is that Jackson Dart is a good quarterback, but not necessarily regarded as one of the very best in college football. He is. Trey Harris is phenomenal. Between Trey Harris and a couple other Ole Miss wide receivers last year, there was a stretch of time, I think it was the Texas A&M game, and then it was the Georgia game, where I saw Ole Miss wide receivers make what I thought were the 2 best catches of the season, both coming from the same team. And Trey Harris was one of them, and I cannot recall who was it. Jordan Watkins made the other catch, possibly. Mississippi State with Blake Shapen, the former Baylor quarterback, coming to SEC Media Days along with Albert Reese, the offensive lineman, John Lewis, linebacker. He's a senior. Mizzou, Luther Burden exploded last year, the former 5-star. Brady Cook at quarterback. This is obviously 2 of the big reasons why Mizzou is hyped for this season, and Mizzou fans. And they are apparently a preseason top 10 team. I get it. Coming off 11-2 with a bowl win against Ohio State. Christian Williams at D-line. Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold. Now that Jackson Arnold and Jackson Dart are in the same conference, I don't know if that's going to make me more apt to confuse their names or not. I think I've got it straightened out now, but for a couple months, especially since neither one of them were playing, I kept juxtaposing their names. Jackson Arnold, Jackson Dart. Danny Stutzman racked up one of the most impressive defensive stat lines in college football last year. Billy Bowman did as well at Oklahoma. OU with a better defense this year, most likely than they've had. So what's being discounted possibly at Oklahoma is that their defense could be better than it's been in a long time. So I understand the concern about a freshman or a first-time starting quarterback and not having overwhelming playmakers and then having to step up in class, especially in the trenches when they were not and have not been a dominant team in the trenches. And of course, we've got the question mark of playing in the SEC when Oklahoma has failed in games against the SEC, but those have been playing typically the best team in the SEC. So Billy Bowman and Danny Stutzman, two of the most accomplished players on the defensive side in college football. And then finally, we've got South Carolina, Alex Huntley, defensive tackle, Luke Doty, who will play athlete, who will, I guess, roam around and be an H-back, wideout kind of guy because, and certainly he can fill in at quarterback. That's what he's been in the past. Debo Williams at linebacker. Tennessee, Cooper Mays, the center, one of the very best. Keenan Pillai, linebacker. Omari Thomas, the defensive lineman as well. And then we've got Texas and Texas A&M. The Horns bring Quinn Ewers, Kelvin Banks, who's going to be a future top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Jahdae Barron, the defensive back as well. And we've got Texas A&M with Shamar Turner, defensive lineman, one of the very best. Torian York, linebacker, and Trey Zune, who's an offensive lineman. Texas A&M has many questions along the offensive line. And last but not least, or last but least, certainly the team you've all been waiting for. Who's going to show up for Vandy? Gunnar Hansen, offensive lineman. Linebacker Langston Patterson, and the safety CJ Taylor. We have left the link in the chat if you'd like to give me a call and talk SEC. Our next live show is the Iowa Live Show, 5:30 Eastern. Please join us then. Nebraska Live at 7. Vegas 12 at 7:30. Michigan at 8. Those are all on their respective team channels. Again, Iowa at 5:30 leads off the night here at the Voice of College Football. Many exciting things going on. Again, Tony Siracusa going to stop by later in the week to address realignment in the ACC, specifically with Wake Forest. Steve Dace, win totals. So I'm on Michigan Podcast later today. So that will be released on the Michigan Podcast channel with Steve whenever he releases that, I think later in the day. And then we're going to have Steve on this week, that to be released on Thursday morning. Thursday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time premiere. Steve Dace, win totals, Big Ten talk, Michigan talk. And again, if you're not with us at the top of the show, Phil Steele has just contacted me to say, hang tight, Mark, I'll be on. His media schedule after he gets this publication put together and released is insane. I know he gets to as many shows as he can get to based on his conversations with me. Tries to get to as many quality shows as possible. All right, we get to the 2025 commits that have come in the door here in the last couple of days in the SEC. Anything of note? SEC, 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 Georgia. Jalen Morgan out of Tennessee, safety, 6 feet 180, 28th rated at his position, 7th rated in Tennessee. Seems to be a low recruit for Georgia standards, but they scout the players. They know who they want, of course. So we look at the rankings. We understand that the rankings are extremely meaningful in totality. But the guy that is considered to be the 28th best safety in college football or in high school football coming into college could turn out to be the best. Absolutely. Elsewhere in the SEC, Mizzou on the board. That's Kelton, or is that Chiton with an I? Chiton Jones, offensive lineman, 6'4", 315. They're growing them big these days out of high school. Coffeyville, Kansas. And then we've got another Georgia commit, cornerback, Shamari Iris, 8th rated cornerback in the nation. We've seen a lot of cornerbacks in recent days come off the board, some to Ohio State. Dorian Brew, the most recent that I can think of at the elite level, to Oregon. And now we've got the 8th rated cornerback, according to 247 Sports, a top 70 player in the nation, 2nd rated player out of the state of Virginia that plays good high school football. Shamari Earls to Georgia. The rich get richer. Ole Miss, Major Preston, cornerback, 77th rated out of the state of Florida IMG Academy. So we don't know exactly where he's from based on that. But they typically know what they're doing at IMG Academy. So he's probably pretty well prepared to play, or will be at some point. Texas, Cade Phillips, safety out of Missouri City, Texas. And he's a top 250 player nationally. Oklahoma, Amorian Robinson, which reminds me, we've got some Oklahoma coverage coming up later this week. We're excited about that. So I'll be on with Two Plain Sports recording this afternoon. So be looking out for those videos on the Oklahoma channel. And then also we're going live with Sooners Live Thursday at 1 Eastern, noon Central. Oklahoma Sooners Live Thursday. And I guess we'll stop right here. As of 2 or 3 days ago, Jaden Breaker, edge rusher out of the state of Georgia, goes to South Carolina. You can be the 70th rated player. The state of Georgia has this kind of talent, and it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper every year. You can be the 70th rated player in the state of Georgia. You can say this about few states. Few states even have 70 players rated. You can be the 70th rated player in the state of Georgia and commit to an SEC team. Crazy. One of the reasons why the SEC is not going away, and one of the reasons why most likely it will battle as either the best conference in college football, or as it has been over the last 15 years, will be just decided the best conference in college football going forward. Too many players in the footprint. Too many players in the footprint, and too many universities that are committed to excelling in football. That has been, we could do a series on why the SEC has dominated or nearly dominated college football, certainly been the best for the last 15 plus years. We could do a series on it, but if we were just going to make two statements, It would be number one, that they've got the most players in their footprint. And players, even in this era, generally stay close to home. They like to stay close to home, generally. So that's a huge advantage. Number two, their universities, their presidents, on down the hierarchy, they are committed. Their state legislatures, even going to that degree, whatever they can do within that state to fund and to support, to promote that SEC school, they do it. Unlike any other conference in the country. If you took the mid to lower echelon of the SEC, if we took the last 15 years in the SEC and we ranked the programs, and then we did the same in the Big Ten, which the Big Ten is the only one that's comparable. And of course, the war going forward between the two is going to be fascinating because the SEC took the step with Oklahoma, Texas, but I believe that the Big Ten has added more, not just in quantity, but Oregon, USC, Washington, UCLA should be a better and more significant addition than just the two, Oklahoma, Texas. Should be. Not by a lot. When it was just USC, UCLA, it was still Oklahoma, Texas over those two. But once it became Oregon, Washington added to the Big Ten, so the Big Ten has closed the gap. Now, how much? We will see, of course. I always hate when people say we will see. Of course, we will see. Yes, we're discussing it now to try to determine how we will see it, when we will see it, and what it will look like. We all know that we will see it, but I'm simply making the statement that it's, of course, going to play out, and I can make all sorts of speculations about how that's going to be affected each league's quality. I'll say it this way. The SEC is the best conference in college football right now. It's not debatable. Right this second, it's not debatable because we can only go on past performance, and that is clearly the SEC. If anybody would like to have that conversation with me, certainly jump on the line and discuss that. But I will clearly show you that the SEC was the best last year and all the other years prior to that for about 15 to 18 years. And then it becomes a bit more debatable before that. However, I think two things are at play here. How are we going to rate and evaluate these conferences going forward? Because I believe that even though the Big Ten has closed the gap, the SEC will most likely, if you're looking at the entire conference, top to bottom, most likely will continue to be the best conference. And I'm sure there are comments coming in. So if you have any comments for me, certainly I will take them. But the big caveat is, what is the public perception of that quality of play? Meaning, do people care about your 4-18 being better than their 4-18? I do. I look at that, but there aren't many like us. So most only care about the elite. And this is where the Big Ten has the opportunity. The Big Ten's elite, they can match the SEC's elite. And therefore, the SEC could continue to be a deeper conference where if Tennessee's the seventh best team in the SEC, they could be better than Washington. And all the teams jammed between 5 and 10 in both leagues could be in the SEC's direction in regards to quality. However, again, except for people like me that analyze it top to bottom, deliver the metrics, deliver the results, put it into context, and we discuss it here, most people will only care about the top. Who won the national championship? Who played in the national championship? Who made it to the semifinals? Okay, what did those top 2 or 3 look like? First and foremost, what league won the national championship? That will be the first question going forward between the SEC and the Big Ten. I don't know if any other leagues are going to win national championships. I'll put myself on record saying that right now. I highly doubt, unless Clemson or Florida State can win a national championship in the next 2 years before they exit the ACC, and that's a long shot. These 2 leagues are going to produce all the national champions. And so you're going to have those people out there that are simply going to say, Alabama won the national championship. The SEC is the best conference. Then you're going to have people like me that dissect it all the way through, all the way to 18. And the tipping point might be, oh, Purdue's better than Vanderbilt. The Big Ten's better. But most people don't care about that. They're going to look at, you smart college football fans are going to look at the Alabama national championship. But if the Big Ten, let's say Michigan lost the national championship game to Bama and it was a field goal, and then the Big Ten had another team in the semifinal, or maybe the other 2 teams in the semifinal. Let's say it was Bama, Michigan, Ohio State, and USC in the national semifinals. And there were all other indicators at the top of college football that the Big Ten was better. Then smart people would be able to latch on to that narrative and push that and drive that to say the Big Ten's better, even though the SEC won the national championship, or vice versa, of course. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. It is going to be truly fascinating. These 2 conferences going at it in a 12-team playoff. In the past, think about this. How many times have the SEC and the Big Ten played in college football playoff games? 2014, Ohio State beat Alabama. 2015, Bama crushed Michigan State. 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, Bama beat Ohio State in the championship game. 2021, Georgia whipped Michigan. 22, Georgia beat Ohio State. 23, Michigan beat Bama. What's the record on that? I should have kept track. Let's see. Big Ten, 1-0, 1-1. 1-2, 1-3, 1-4, 2-4. SEC 4, Big Ten 2. So that is the tote board for the college football playoff. What's my point going to be? Okay, so we only saw 6 games in 10 years between the 2 conferences. And we saw, don't call me while I'm on the air. And so, and we really only saw 2 teams in play for each league. Michigan State, sure, but we only saw, it was Ohio State and Michigan against Georgia and Alabama. So now we're going to see depth given to that. We're going to see more frequency. We should see 2, 3, 4 games between these conferences for a number of reasons. Number one, you got more games in the playoffs. And number 2, you also have a consolidation of the best teams in the other conferences going to the SEC and the Big Ten. Oregon, USC, Washington, Oklahoma, Texas. So we're going to have opportunities for these 2 leagues to get together Because before, the evaluation was always, okay, there was one playoff game and Ohio State beat Alabama, or Bama beat Ohio State in the championship game, or Georgia beat Michigan, or Michigan beat Bama, whatever the result was. There was only one playoff game, if that, 6 in 10 years between the two. And then we would go to, okay, was there a big New Year's Six game? Ole Miss and Penn State, or some decent bowl games. Citrus Bowl, Outback Bowl, Wisconsin LSU, Alabama Michigan 2019. And we would look at that, and then that would be the determination of who's better, the SEC or the Big Ten. And of course, the SEC's record in the playoff, regardless of what happens going into the future, the SEC will always be able to say for that 10-year, 14 playoff, we crushed it. Crushed it. The Big Ten went, well, Michigan went 2-0, 2-1, 2-2. Ohio State went 2-0, 2-1, 2-2, 3-3, 3-3, 3-4, 3-4. Michigan State 0-1. That's it from the Big Ten. Alabama, we won't go through the SEC. I think the league went 14-4. If that's not correct, it's within a game. 14-4, and the Big Ten went something like 5-7. So we've got our guy, Billy J, saying here, the Big Ten badly lacks teams who compete for championships. Too many Illinois, Minnesota, Purdue, Michigan State, Rutgers, Maryland, not competing for anything. Okay, well, Michigan State not long ago was competing for championships. So if you're talking about conference championships, that is all correct. That is all correct. We will consider Purdue playing in the Big Ten championship game to be a bit of a farce because the leagues between the West and the East were so unbalanced that they should not have been playing in that game. So I would agree with that statement to a certain extent. So we've got how many teams there? 4, 5, 6, 7. Except, again, Michigan State was playing for Big Ten championships up until about 2017, 18. But I would agree with that assessment. However, Vanderbilt, when is Arkansas competing for big SEC championships? Never. When is Mississippi State competing for SEC championships? Never. Ole Miss looks like they're on the verge of competing, and possibly you could say that they were last year. Yeah, they were in the mix. They could have made the SEC championship game. The 2 big years under Hugh Freeze, they could have made the SEC championship game. South Carolina never competes for the SEC championship. Kentucky never competes for the SEC championship. So we're up to Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Mississippi State. So those 4. Texas A&M. They look impressive on paper. The recruiting classes look impressive. They got a ton of money. They've got 100,000 people in the stands. They usually finish with a decent, pre the last 2 seasons were awful. Before that, a lot of 8-4s turn into 9-4, 8-5s. But did they compete for championships? No. Texas A&M has not competed for championships. So the list is fair. Has Tennessee, outside of 2 years ago, did they compete for the SEC championship? Georgia stomped them to the ground, and they lost to South Carolina by 25 points. So their record looked good. I don't know that they competed for the SEC championship. And if you can say that Tennessee competed for the SEC championship, I would say that Purdue, Minnesota, and Illinois and others on that list have competed for the Big Ten championship because they've come just as close to winning the Big Ten championship as Tennessee has the SEC championship. I'm talking the last 5 to 10 years. So we can make a list in the SEC that is just about as long as that list. But to your point, Billy J, I do agree because I don't want to contradict myself, and I don't want to argue just for the sake of arguing with you, because I generally agree with that point. Because the teams that I just mentioned out of the SEC have largely been better than the teams that you're talking about there. Mississippi State has gone generally 8-4 and been a pretty good team going to and winning bowl games, going back to Dan Mullen when he turned the program around. And some of the teams that I brought up have competed better than the teams that you just listed there, for the most part. Although Minnesota's been fairly decent under PJ Fleck. And, of course, Michigan State, aside from one Mel Tucker season, has been awful since Mark D'Antonio left. Maryland's done nothing to move the needle, except they've, again, if championships are your qualifier, then yeah, I can come up with a rare instance here and there with some of those teams, but not really. Keep chopping. Keep chopping. Give me a call sometime because I got to straighten you out on a few things here, but we love you. Appreciate you being here. The lower end of the SEC is really bad. Don't buy the ESPN spin machine. Well, hopefully you're not talking to me. Maybe you're talking to people in the chat. I would be the last person to buy anyone's spin machine. The lower end, well, let's understand that the lower end means the lower end. Therefore, the lower end of every conference doesn't look good because they lose the games. So somebody's got to lose the games. Every game that's played, somebody's got to lose, regardless of how good your conference is. Somebody has to lose the games. So therefore, the bottom of every league, the records are going to be bad. This is an incorrect statement. In comparison to, now, really bad, what does that mean? Is South Carolina really bad? Mississippi State really bad? Vanderbilt really bad? Vandy? Yes. Put them aside. They're awful. The bad part of the SEC, is better than all the other conferences. Not just this second, but in recent history. The SEC bottom is better than everybody else's bottom. So it's not really bad. Mark, many of the SEC teams at least flash at times with an upset win. Michigan 29-1 in the last 3 years. Ohio State 17 of the last 18 years with 0-1 Big Ten loss. Yes, nobody can beat Ohio State in the Big Ten for years and years and years. Ohio State's average record is 11-1 for the last 20 years. And they've got a Michigan problem right now. So discounting them playing each other. Yeah, but this is a different, again, what the comments that we're making right now, evaluating both of these leagues, are less valid than they've ever been for this one basic reason. We are talking in the preseason about two leagues that have been decidedly changed in the offseason, especially the Big Ten with adding 4 schools. So Ohio State and Michigan, they both play Oregon this year. One of them plays USC. All right. So no calls, no comments or questions. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Our next show is Iowa Live, 5:30 Eastern. You've got Iowa Live, Nebraska Live, Biggest 12 Live, Michigan Live, all today at the Voice of College Football. We will see you in just about 5.5 hours.